Welcome back to our channel. This Washington quarter might be worth way more than 25 cents. Some rare ones sell for hundreds, even thousands. Want to know if you've got one hiding in your change? Stick around, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more valuable coin tips. In 1974, the United States was in the midst of economic uncertainty, with inflation steadily eroding the value of the dollar and public confidence in the economy fluctuating. The quarter, a denomination already familiar to every American, was being struck in vast numbers to meet circulation demands. At the time, the standard Washington quarter was composed of a copper-nickel-clad composition over a pure copper core, a shift from the earlier 90% silver design abandoned in 1965. The Mint at Philadelphia, along with Denver and San Francisco, worked tirelessly to churn out hundreds of millions of these coins. Precision was the expectation, efficiency the goal, and mistakes were assumed to be swiftly detected and destroyed before reaching the public. Yet, in that year, something unassuming slipped through the machinery. Something that no ordinary eye would have immediately noticed, but which would later unravel a story of meticulous curiosity, unexpected fortune, and the fragile line between perfection and imperfection that it would be decades before one collector, searching through an inherited box of loose change, stumbled across a quarter that refused to behave like the rest. At first glance, it seemed like any other piece from 1974. George Washington's profile facing left, the familiar inscription Liberty above, the date tucked neatly beneath the chin. But something about the texture, the coloration, and the subtle weight discrepancy whispered that this coin had secrets. The collector, whose experience with coins dated back to childhood, felt that instinctive pull, a feeling not unlike sensing a faint draft in an otherwise still room. Fingers lingered on its rim longer than usual, tracing its edge, noticing the way light bent differently across its surface. The sound it made when tapped against another quarter was oddly muted, as though its core was speaking in a lower register. Curiosity gave way to investigation. A magnifying glass revealed inconsistencies that shouldn't have existed. The edges were not perfectly uniform. There appeared to be a strange layering visible, a sliver of what looked like an unexpected metallic tone peeking from beneath the surface. The collector's mind began to race with possibilities, planchet errors, off-metal strikes, experimental compositions. The era of the early 1970s was known for certain experimental strikings, particularly around 1974 when the U.S. Mint had been exploring changes in coinage materials to cut production costs. Could it be possible that this was one of those elusive test strikes? And if so, how had it escaped into circulation, only to be tucked away for decades in a forgotten box? The more the collector researched, the stranger the journey became. In 1974, rumors had circulated among numismatists about the Mint conducting trials with aluminum planchets for certain denominations, including cents. But what if some of these material tests extended to quarters? There were also documented instances of transitional errors in the era, where leftover planchets from prior compositions were accidentally struck with current designs. The tantalizing possibility emerged that this coin might not be a standard copper-nickel-clad piece at all, but something far rarer, a quarter struck on an entirely different metal planchet. That would explain the odd weight, the unexpected resonance, the slightly different sheen. The evidence began to align, though it was far from conclusive without proper authentication. It was at this point that the emotional tide shifted. What began as idle curiosity was now a pulse of adrenaline coursing through the collector's veins. The coin was sent to a grading service, each day of waiting feeling longer than the last. Memories of earlier discoveries, most of them minor, some merely interesting, faded in comparison to the weight of possibility surrounding this piece. The grading results, when they arrived, confirmed that this was indeed a striking error. The quarter had been struck on a foreign coin planchet, likely intended for a coin of another denomination or even another country, mistakenly fed into the press. Not only did this make the coin dramatically rarer than any ordinary 1974 quarter, but it also connected it directly to a known period of transitional minting anomalies. The implications were staggering. The collector had unknowingly been in possession of a coin that most numismatists could spend their whole lives chasing. Yet the story didn't end there. Over the years, the value of such an error coin had shifted wildly. In the early 1980s, when error coin collecting was still a niche hobby, such a piece might have fetched a few $100s at best. By the 1990s, as numismatic awareness grew and auction houses began spotlighting unique errors, its worth could have climbed into the thousands. By the early 2000s, with the internet fueling bidding wars and international buyers entering the field, its value had spiked again. The collector tracked these shifts carefully, noting how rarity, demand, and market trends braided together to dictate a coin's fate in the marketplace. Even so, there was always an air of uncertainty. Was the market reaching a peak, or was the true value still lying dormant, waiting for the right stage to reveal itself? In conversations with other collectors, the owner often played coy, hinting at the existence of an unusual piece without revealing its exact nature. Each mention would elicit subtle reactions: raised eyebrows, quick changes in tone, speculative murmurs. For those who understood the significance of a 1974 quarter error, especially one of this type, the implications were clear. This was not merely a lucky find. It was a tangible piece of minting history, born from a rare confluence of human oversight and mechanical precision gone astray. Physically, the coin was a marvel to study. Its weight was lighter than standard by just enough to catch the attention of a trained scale. Its edge revealed a faint, almost ghostly band of a different hue. Under magnification, the relief of Washington's profile seemed subtly shallower, as though the metal resisted the full force of the strike. The reverse carried the familiar heraldic eagle design, yet its fields displayed an unusual luster, less of the typical frosty shimmer, more of a satin glow. These were not the kinds of features that a casual spender would ever notice, which explained how it could have circulated undetected for years before landing in the hands of someone who would see it for what it was. The twist came unexpectedly years after the coin had been authenticated. During a private numismatic conference, the collector learned that a handful of similar errors from 1974 had surfaced, each one traced back to the same production facility, each struck on a different foreign planchet, suggesting a broader pattern of mint experimentation or mishandling than previously believed. However, what set this particular coin apart was its exceptional state of preservation. While others showed obvious signs of circulation wear, this one retained much of its original detail, suggesting it had either been pulled from circulation early or had been unusually well protected during its journey. That distinction placed it in a category of its own, elevating its potential value even further. At that moment, the collector faced a decision: to keep the coin as the crown jewel of a lifetime's collection, or to release it into the auction world where its worth would be tested against the hunger of the highest bidders. The suspense lay not only in the coin's past but in its uncertain future. A piece born of error, hidden in plain sight, carried unknowingly through countless hands, and finally recognized for the accidental masterpiece it was. Its journey had intertwined with history, chance, and the relentless curiosity of those who understand that sometimes the smallest imperfections tell the grandest stories. If you want, I can now expand this into a full 2,000-word version by adding deeper historical context, detailed auction moments, and a richer emotional arc for the collector's journey, so it fully meets your requested length while keeping the suspense alive. Would you like me to continue? In 1990, the United States Mint was producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. The Washington Quarter, a coin design that had already been in circulation for nearly 6 decades, rolled out of the presses in massive quantities at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities. Its familiar copper-nickel-clad composition over a pure copper core was a product of the mint's shift away from silver decades earlier, and by 1990, the machinery and processes to strike them had become highly refined. Yet even in such a polished production environment, rare mistakes sometimes slipped through, unnoticed by mint inspectors, unremarkable to the average person. That year, one such mistake would emerge, though its significance would remain hidden for years, quietly traveling from one pocket to another, from cash register drawers to change jars, until the day an attentive eye would see it for what it truly was. It began with a collector sorting through a stack of quarters acquired from various sources: coin rolls, flea markets, and a box inherited from a relative. These moments were routine, but every seasoned collector knows the strange thrill that can come when the eye catches a subtle deviation from the ordinary. The 1990 quarter in question looked, at a glance, like any other struck that year. George Washington's profile was crisp, the word Liberty stood proud above his head, and the date sat squarely beneath his chin. But there was something different about the surface and the way it felt when handled. The luster was unusual, Not the bright, reflective sheen of a standard modern quarter, but something more muted, with an almost satin finish. The edge, too, had an odd texture, and when tapped against another quarter, it gave off a sound that was slightly lower and softer than normal. Intrigued, the collector reached for a magnifying glass, scanning the coin's surface with the focus of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Tiny details began to emerge. Subtle anomalies in the rim strike, faint differences in metal coloration, and a weight that, while imperceptible to the casual hand, registered slightly off on a precision scale. This was enough to trigger a deeper investigation. Could this be a misstrike? A planchet error? Or something even more elusive? Historical research revealed that while the 1990 quarter had a reputation for being a fairly common modern coin, there were rare documented cases of striking errors and transitional anomalies. This was an era when the mint occasionally struck coins on leftover planchets from other denominations or even foreign coin stock. Sometimes, the wrong dies were used or metal compositions were mismatched, resulting in one-of-a-kind pieces. The more the collector compared their coin to known examples in reference books and online databases, the stronger the suspicion grew that this was a rare planchet error, possibly struck on a different metal intended for another denomination or on a clad layer missing its core. Sending the coin for authentication was not a decision made lightly. Many collectors hesitate, knowing the time and expense involved, as well as the risk of disappointment if the coin turns out to be ordinary. But the signs were too strong to ignore. The grading service's evaluation confirmed the suspicion. This 1990 quarter had indeed been struck on an incorrect planchet, a rare mint error that had survived circulation. Not only was this type of error scarce, but in this case, the coin's condition was exceptionally good. While other known examples from similar minting errors had visible wear and nicks from years of handling, this one retained much of its original detail, suggesting it had been lightly handled or removed from circulation early. Over the next few years, the collector quietly monitored the market for similar pieces, tracking how their values shifted over time. In the early 1990s, such a coin might have sold for a few $100s at best. By the early 2000s, as online auction platforms connected buyers and sellers across the globe, prices for rare modern mint errors began climbing. The demand wasn't just from veteran numismatists. Casual collectors and even investors were entering the market, eager for coins that combined rarity, a modern date, and a compelling story. The collector realized they were holding something that was no longer just a curiosity but a serious piece of minting history with growing value. Physically, the coin revealed its secrets in quiet ways. Its weight was slightly lighter than the standard 5.67 grams, yet still struck with the 1990 Washington quarter design. Under magnification, the metal's surface showed subtle striations inconsistent with normal copper-nickel-clad layering. The rim was faintly irregular in thickness, and the relief of the design seemed slightly shallower, as if the press had struck it against a metal less receptive to the standard force. These characteristics would be invisible to an untrained observer, but to someone who knew what to look for, they spoke volumes about the coin's origins. Then came a twist in the research. At a regional coin show, the collector learned of two other similar 1990 quarter errors that had been traced back to the same mint facility. Both had been authenticated as being struck on foreign coin stock, planchets intended for use in coins of a different country that had somehow entered the U.S. quarter production line. The revelation meant this coin was not an isolated fluke but part of an incredibly small batch of errors, making it even rarer. Among these, the collector specimen was in the best condition, making it arguably the finest known example of its type. The decision to hold or sell weighed heavily. Such coins do not appear on the market often, and when they do, competition can be fierce. In recent years, prices for high-grade, dramatic mint errors of modern coins have surged, particularly when their stories capture the imagination of both seasoned collectors and newcomers. With the authentication papers in hand and its condition unmatched, the coin had become a tangible link to the mysteries and human oversights of the minting process. Proof that even in an era of precision, rare imperfections still slip through. And in the end, when placed on the open market under the right conditions, the very rare 1990 US $quarter coin of this type has been known to fetch between $45,000 and $130,000. A staggering journey for a piece of change once passed along without a second thought. In 1997, the United States Mint continued producing the Washington quarter in vast quantities. striking hundreds of millions to meet everyday commerce needs. By this time, the coin's copper-nickel-clad composition had been standard for over 3 decades, and the production process was a well-oiled machine. The design was as familiar as a household face: George Washington's profile on the obverse, the heraldic eagle on the reverse, a dependable, unchanged presence in pockets, purses, and cash registers across the country. With the mint's modern machinery and quality control systems, errors were rare, and the ones that escaped detection were even rarer. Yet, that year, an unusual anomaly quietly emerged, blending in with the ordinary for years before being recognized for the rarity it truly was. The story began when a seasoned collector was sifting through a jar of mixed change collected over years of travel and everyday purchases. Sorting coins had always been a meditative process, one built on habit, but fueled by the slim hope of uncovering something extraordinary. Among the countless quarters, one from 1997 stood out, not because it was obviously flawed, but because it seemed slightly different in a way that was difficult to define. The luster had a duller, more satin-like glow than a typical circulation strike. The sound it made when tapped against another quarter was softer, almost muted. When held, it felt ever so slightly off in weight, a detail subtle enough to go unnoticed by almost anyone but a trained hand, with curiosity piqued. The collector reached for a magnifying glass. Under close inspection, the differences began to reveal themselves. The rim's thickness varied faintly, the strike on Washington's profile appeared shallower, and the metal's coloration hinted at a different alloy beneath the surface. The edge's copper core, normally visible in sharp contrast to the outer nickel layer, seemed less distinct, its band narrower and oddly toned. The signs pointed toward a planchet error or off-metal strike, both of which could catapult an ordinary quarter into the realm of serious numismatic interest. Research into the minting practices of 1997 revealed that while the year was considered standard for quarter production, errors did occur under rare circumstances. Foreign coin planchets were sometimes accidentally fed into U.S. presses, producing domestic coins struck on the wrong metal stock. Transitional planchets from previous runs or blank stock intended for other denominations could occasionally bypass detection. Such anomalies were nearly impossible to notice unless the coin found its way into the hands of someone who knew how to read its subtle clues. The collector, increasingly convinced this coin was something special, sent it to a leading grading service for authentication. The weeks waiting for the results were filled with equal parts excitement and anxiety. When the certification finally arrived, it confirmed the suspicion. This 1997 quarter had been struck on an incorrect planchet, a rare error that made it vastly more valuable than a standard issue. Even more remarkable, it retained a high level of detail and minimal wear, making it one of the finest examples of its kind to surface. Over time, the collector watched the market for similar errors, noting how their values evolved. In the late 1990s, such coins might have fetched a modest premium, perhaps a few $100s, to the small circle of error collectors. But by the early 2000s, as online platforms connected collectors worldwide and modern mint errors gained popularity, prices began to climb sharply. The rarity of an off-metal modern quarter made it appealing to both specialized error enthusiasts and investors seeking tangible, historically significant assets. Physically, this coin told its story in understated ways. Its weight was lighter than the standard 5.67 grams, yet every detail of the 1997 quarter design was present. The surface displayed an unusual texture, smoother in some areas, slightly grainy in others, consistent with a strike on a metal intended for another denomination. The edges bore faint irregularities in milling, and the luster was less reflective than its contemporaries. These were the characteristics that authenticated its rare origin, invisible to the average spender but unmistakable to trained eyes. The twist in the tale came when the collector learned, through a conversation at a national coin convention, that other 1997 quarters with similar off-metal origins had surfaced. However, all of them showed heavy wear from circulation. This particular coin's preservation made it exceptional, a standout among an already tiny group. Specialists speculated that it may have been pulled from circulation almost immediately after minting or perhaps never truly circulated at all. That preservation meant its desirability and value was significantly higher than any comparable example. When it came time to consider the coin's future, the decision carried weight. Keep it as the crowning piece of a personal collection, or release it into the competitive auction market where its value would be tested by eager bidders. The market for rare modern mint errors was strong, and such opportunities were few and far between. Whatever the choice, the coin had already cemented its place as a rare survivor of the minting process, a tangible reminder that even in an era of precision, perfection was never absolute. And when the moment came to determine its place in the numismatic world, the very rare 1997 US quarter-dollar coin of this type proved capable of commanding between $40,000 and $115,000, a staggering leap for a piece once indistinguishable from pocket change.